Audio's live. I got to figure out my camera. But we're live. We're definitely live. And this is perfect time because now the camera's not on. So this is the best time for me to sneak away from the desk to turn off the air conditioner. Boop. Boop, boop, boop. And so you probably have heard the sound change in the background because the AC's off. But the camera's still not up. Give it a sec. I just need to boot up XSplit Broadcaster and we'll be all good. Woof. There we go. That's me. Hey, I can see me. You can see me too. All right, gang's all here. Ah, my goodness. We hit 200. We hit 200 subs. Who subbed? This is Sparta996. Thank you. We hit 200. Not subs, 200 follows. Excuse me. Correct myself. We're still need more subs. But 200 follows. Fuck yes. This is Sparta. Thank you. That's awesome. Thanks for knocking us over the edge there. Sometimes getting knocked over the edge is not so good, like when you're standing on the edge of a building. But sometimes getting knocked over the edge is great, and we're experiencing that right now. So, I'm excited. Oh, yes. This is a exciting day, I think. I'm excited for our topic today. I've really felt that the past couple days, just ranting instead of sharing videos, has invigorated me more. And the feedback I've gotten from you guys is better. So if you prefer to watch the videos, definitely make some noise and be like, hey, Moses, this is fucking lame. No one wants to hear you talk. We want to watch YouTube videos. And I will bring that back 150%. But I have a feeling that some folks, at least, are getting more value out of this. Now, I'm looking over here because there's a book that I've been looking for all friggin' morning. I am positive I have it. Oh, dang, I just thought I found it. Hey, NyQuil, what's up? What do mushrooms look like? Look, man, I want to find this book. It's called The Alchemy of Opposites by Rodolfo Scarafalo. And I could summarize, I can summarize a lot of it. I want to present some of the specifics of it, but geez, I don't know where I misplaced that book. But that's very much the topic I'm trying to add. Snow off the bluff. What's up? Welcome, sir. Thank you very much for your kind words. Let's see who else is here. Academy Impossible, another TV viewer. Cool. Gang's all here. Well, I wanted to build on the theme, that we started yesterday about empathy, and that has exploded on my Instagram timeline in a highly interactive post. I'm sure I'll have to get in there and respond to some criticisms and comments. But the idea, well, I'll step back from where we're at and through to the bigger idea. The idea of where we're at and how we got into this discussion in the current context and how there's a debate cooking up on my Instagram right now is that I put forth that, in fact, the idea of a vaxxer or an anti-vaxxer is a complete fiction. And I would say it's a fiction based on a few things. One, there are humans, and then there are vaxxers and there are anti-vaxxers. That's not the case. They're all humans. Second, when this COVID thing blows over, fucking 30 years from now, no one will still identify as a vaxxer or an anti-vax. Maybe for a new vaccine, but different terms. Or masker, anti-masker. It's situational. It's different responses to a situation. And in that, we're acting like these are two completely fucking different species. He's a vaxxer, she's an anti-vaxxer. And that, as any species are, that these are fixed and homogenous things. Vaxxers are all alike, and anti-vaxxers are all alike, and there are actually things called that. And I would argue that that's complete bullshit. And I would argue, in fact, that there is only frightened humans. Some people are more frightened of the virus. Some people are more frightened of the government. Some people are more frightened of other humans. Some people are more frightened of pharmaceutical companies. Some people are more frightened. But all there is, on either extreme of this, is frightened humans. And the more frightened they are, the more energy that goes in this, the more polarized they become, the more they split to the ends. And this gives the appearance that they're separate things, when in fact they are the same. And the purpose of this talk is not to talk about vaccines or any of that stuff, but to present that concept that two things that are of the same nature, when they are energized, will become polarized. When they become polarized, they will appear or manifest as opposites. And when they manifest as opposites, they appear very different. When in fact, there is a unity to opposites that other things don't share. I'm going to take it off something as loaded as vax, anti-vax, because then people, emotions, use something basic. Cold and hot. Can we agree that no one has emotional responses to the idea of cold and the idea of hot? First of all, of course, it's relative. What's cold to someone who's used to a hot climate is different than what's cold to someone who's used to a cold climate. So first of all, it's relative, but even to each other, so relative to the observer, I should say, but to each other, cold and hot are degrees of relativity. It's how much heat energy is in a system, right? But they're both measures of heat energy. There's no, this is cold, this is hot. It's just heat. In fact, there's no such in a way, there's no such thing as cold, because cold is an absence of heat, but it's just zero heat, so it's still measuring heat. Yeah? Sister Coyote, why will you not be able to join us? I'm glad you're able to join us today, but that's concerning to me. I hope there are no barriers in your way, and that whatever are there, I can help you remove. So, again, we could go cold and hot. Let's do light and dark. Dark is simply the absence of light. As soon as there is light in the situation, there is some light, and then it's a matter of a degree of light, how much light there is. Dark being defined as zero light. Dark is zero light. Sister Coyote, you can absolutely play this for the employees, my dear. You're very welcome to. And if they don't like it, that's their problem. You're the boss. I'm just kidding. But you know, Dulce plays it with people in her chair. But I agree. I understand you won't necessarily be able to interact with us, which is fine. Well, and of course, it's always recorded, so you can watch the replay. So, we can go cold and hot. We can go light and dark. We can go... Here's one I like to do. Because we can talk about the singular identity of opposites. That one's a little hard. But sometimes when we talk first about the interdependence of opposites, it's makes more sense, and then we can talk to the singularity of opposites. So one of my favorite examples of the interdependence of opposites is rioters and riot police. Apparently, on the face, very opposite, at odds with one another. Meant to clash, have no common ground, cannot see eye to eye. Rioters, we'll say like, whatever, we'll just say rioters, because I don't want to get into loaded political shit. So rioters and riot police, these are opposed to each other, one would think. But, in fact, they're totally dependent upon each other. Totally dependent on each other. If there were no rioters, it would be beyond absurd to have riot police. If there were no riot police, goons repressing with the armor and all the gas and all that, it would be fairly absurd to have rioters. But with the existence of each one's counterpart, they become... Snow Off the Bluff said it. Yes. Let me, how do I add that? There you go. Snow Off the Bluff said, "We're bravely standing our ground and you assholes are attacking us." Rioters and riot police to among themselves. Exactly. Right? That's it. They're doing the same thing and are entirely interdependent for their existence upon one another. If there were no government, there could be no anarchist. And if there was no anarchist who says like, eschew order entirely, there would be no role for government to say, whoa, someone's got to step in here and make some order. Right? Each of these things is a counterpart, and they are deeply interdependent. And we can get into the philosophical, why does there need to be evil in the world? Well, there couldn't be good without evil. There couldn't be dark without light. All this. These are, I think, oversimplistic, or they just tend not to fluff this idea out enough to explain it, right? Because if good is the willingness to do better than evil, and evil is the willingness to, quote-unquote, do worse than good, even the very definition of each thing is tied up in the other. So there's this interdependence of opposites that transcends... I think it's more a product of consciousness than of reality, in my own personal opinion. I think this is just how our mind works. We define things, we sort of stretch a field in our psyche and say, this is one boundary, this is the other boundary of this field. And things occur on a spectrum of this field, between these two boundaries. This is bad and this is good. And things occur on this spectrum between very bad and very good, as it were. This is cold, this is hot. And it's interesting when we talk about the unity of opposites, because, again, the idea of an opposite is something that is completely unlike, right? So when you think of colors, yeah, is red red is opposite to green on the color wheel? Is red completely unlike green? It's unlike it in a number of ways, but in some ways they are completely alike. They are both primary colors, or they're both colors. Sorry, green's not a primary color. They are both colors. They are both the result of light, our brains processing light in the visual spectrum. They are both just different wavelengths, in fact, of the same thing. So we can see them as opposite, but it's not really so. It's not really so. They're the same thing. It's like, well, is your foot opposite your hand? In some way, a kid might say a foot is an opposite of a hand, and they wouldn't be wrong. Is a head an opposite of a foot? They're just different parts of the same organism. They're not opposite. They're not opposed. The idea of an opposite suggests that they are in opposition. But my foot is not opposed to my head in any way. My head is not opposed to my foot. And nonetheless, if I had a foot on my head or I had a head on my foot, this would be much more difficult to get around. Yeah? So I think there's a baked-in polarization that we succumb to. Because we have our preferences, and that's natural. Everybody has their preferences. They're one side or the other. And where I think that then becomes dangerous is that when our preferences, our ego-driven views and things like that, in those places, when we look at the other side of the same thing that we are, and say, whoa, you are fucking wrong. What are you doing down there? You're supposed to have 2 eyes and a nose and a mouth. You just got those 5 weird, shitty little finger things. You're wrong. You're wrong. And then the foot is looking at the head saying, well, what are you doing with all those holes in you, bud? You're not supposed to have any holes in you. 5 toes and a heel. That's how you get around. Yeah? And at the same time, at no point do the foot or the head look at each other and say, we are part of the same body. The body needs 2 feet and a head. That's the problem we get into. We get into being like, I like it down here. I guess I'm a foot. I'm a foot. And I go on my hashtag foot life, and I go on my foot forum. That's weird. If I say foot forum now, it's starting to sound like I'm talking about something else. But, I'm hanging out with my feet friends. And fuck those heads. Who the fuck do they think they are? All high and mighty, with sound coming out of them and shit. They smell too. And then there's someone else who's, I'm a head. It's great up here. I'm on the top of the shoulders. I'm a head. I can see. I can hear. Look at those gross things down there. Don't they know how much they stink? Turns out they don't, because they don't have fucking noses, head. So we get into this. And we identify a polarized part as an opposite, as something we are opposed to. And then we oppose. And this is very silly, because we're opposing part of ourselves. Interpersonally, this happens all the time. Interpersonally, this happens all the time. When someone comes, or when we come to someone and say, you're a such and such, whatever such and such is of course something that we fear we are, right? We're reflecting part of our own shadow. So it is not that there is me, subject, and there is you, object, and we are opposite in this interaction. We are opposed. To the contrary, there's actually us, humanity. As this becomes energy, that view becomes polarized, and I come to see me and you as 2 separate things. Rather than see the 99.99999999999999999% of things that we have completely in common, I see the 0.01% of things that are different. And so I don't see us as part of the same body. I say you're a foot and I'm a head. When in fact the actual truth is we're both functional parts of the same body. It's nebulous, right? Like it's easy to get away from us. Whatever we're opposed to. Whatever we see as the other in any encounter. Whether it's the mother-in-law or the boss or the coworker or just the asshole in the neighborhood or whatever. We are absolutely one thing polarized to separate. And in that separation, we're only separating in one dimension. I think that's the main point, is that we only ever diverge from opposites in one direction. Meaning, let's talk about color again. Red and green are opposites, right? It would be weird if you had the color wheel and you polarized it and you got red on the one hand and fucking freezing cold on the other. Freezing cold and red have nothing to do with each other. They're not opposites. That said, if an opposite is something as unlike something else as possible, then freezing cold is a better opposite of red than green. Green has a lot in common with red. Freezing cold has very little in common with red. They're not even measures of the same thing, right? Or you could say, what's the opposite of big? Wednesday. Right? That doesn't make any sense. It's not a rational thing. We can't put that together because Wednesday is a day of the week and big is a description of size. The opposite of big is, of course, small. But they're both descriptions of size. In fact, if you add up a lot of smalls, it makes a big. They're not different at all. They're the same thing. They're just different parts of the same thing, yeah? And so, what's the opposite of Wednesday? I don't even know. Wednesday night? Saturday? If you were looking at old astrological timing, you would say Saturday. But here we're getting all these questions that this idea of opposite opposed to, the separateness, is very, very powerful delusion that we all buy into. The idea of subject and object. Yeah, I have a hammer, I have a nail. These are two separate things. I use the hammer on the nail. Well, first, just pure physics. When I hit that hammer or that nail gives as much impact to my hammer as my hammer gives to the nail. Formal logic. The opposite of a thing would be is negation. And the negation is just a thing plus not. So, snow off the bluff then, the opposite of red by that would be not red, which is everything but red. So does that mean that everything is the opposite of everything it's not, by that logic? I'm just making sure I'm following through the formal logic and not looking like I'm not declaring that. I'm asking it as a question, not to bait you into something, but to make sure I'm understanding the idea. Because sometimes I don't understand ideas. And that's okay. So, fall into this false calculation of opposites. And then we get into things that, what is the opposite of? What is the opposite of Wednesday? What is the opposite of 7? We could say there's an opposite of a color. We have a lot more trouble saying there's an opposite of a number. Right? We can say there's opposites to ideas, but again, we're just talking about the other pole of one thing. And so on the interdependence of opposites, we can go into the Taoist idea of the interdependence of opposites and say, well, if we didn't have cold, how would we know warm? If we didn't have sad, how would we know happy? Totally valid. Totally valid. I think it goes to an even more practical level. Because those things, as I was a kid, I was like, yeah, true, but I don't know what it's like to not know sad. Perhaps if I did not know sad, I would know happy. And again, from the formal logic definition, right? Not sad is happy. So if we didn't know sad, we would only know happy based on formal logic. So I think we get into maybe a tough zone, rationalizing through that when we're talking about interdependence of opposite. But interdependence of opposite, how about feelings having opposites? Sure, what about feelings having opposites, right? What's the opposite of happy? Is it sad or is it angry? Or is it calm? Or is it asleep? I don't know if sleep's even emotion, right? It gets tricky. At first, we think that opposites are very delineated things. We think that there is right and wrong, us and them, vaxxer, anti-vaxxer, whatever the fuck there is. And as we dive into it, those opposites collapse. Sometimes, again, in one dimension there is divergence, but in every other dimension there is agreement. Vaxxer, anti-vaxxer, right? The larger dimension of anyone who would call another person a vaxxer or an anti-vaxxer, I don't use those terms. Anyone who uses those terms is probably doing something because they're very afraid right now. Right? If you're getting you're calling other people anti-vaxxers, you think everyone should get vaccinated because you are afraid of the consequence of people not getting vaccinated. If you're calling other people vaxxers, you think no one should get vaccinated. It's because you are afraid, maybe not you're physically afraid, but you're afraid of losing some freedom, losing some liberty, afraid of the government, afraid of corporations, afraid of being lied to, afraid of being made a fool, afraid of something. And the more polarized, the more charged it gets, the more polarized it gets, the more fear there is, the more each side digs in. Afraid of the world will leave our children. Afraid, it's always based in fear. To say that it's based in love, you can't approach it in that way. If it were based in love, one couldn't approach it in that way. But the highly charged polarization and the adversarial stance is a sure sign, in fact, that it's the same. Another example. Who is the opposite of America, the adversary, the enemy of America? We might say China. But opposite ideals. Not opposite in any way. They're not opposite in any fucking way. It's different. It's like saying vanilla is the opposite of chocolate. It's both fucking ice cream. Straight up. Pepsi's the opposite of Coke. That's insane. It's both. So most of that is the same. Chemically, Pepsi and Coke, mostly the same. Fuck it. Chemically, Pepsi and Sprite, mostly the same. Right? To the point, even Pepsi and water, mostly the same. So, to say opposite is a really big thing. So, Sister Coyote, totally. A lot of anti-vaxxers have been pre-COVID. But did you identify as... Did people call you an anti-vaxxer? And did you identify as an anti-vaxxer? I think that's... You might just say that, like, I don't vaccinate my kids. That doesn't mean I am an anti-vaxxer. Right? Like, I don't eat pork myself, but I'm not an anti-porker. Right? By no means am I an anti-porker. I'm not like, oh, the pork industry's evil, even though they probably are. That's not my stance. I just don't eat pork. And nor, like... I don't give my kids all the vaccines either. We give them some of them, So that's kind of I think when we define ourselves, and in general, this is my problem with like atheists. They define themselves in opposition to theism rather than what they are. Like I don't care what you think about theism. What are you? I get you're not a theist. You're atheist. But what are you? Are you humanist? You rationalist? What are you? I don't give a fuck if you're not I'm not going to stand here and say, like, well, I'm an ahumanist, I'm an irrationalist. No, but, I believe what I believe. I'm not saying I'm an everything I'm not. I'm just saying what I am. And I think we can get fooled into these very polarized adversarial postures. And I say this as a guy who, like, adversarial thought's a big part of what I think about. If you guys have been watching my stories recently, I've been posting all sorts of, old Chinese and Russian adversarial strategy things because they're interestingly relevant. Some of them seem kind of familiar with what's going on now. Adversarial thought, red teaming and all that stuff. I love that stuff. And this is part of it, right? Because this is how we polarize within an organization, within a country, within whatever, to start driving things apart. So it's easier to drive in the middle. So in general, whenever we declare opposition, especially when something's that 99 point massive amount the same as us, we declare opposition to ourselves. It's impossible not to. I'll do masking, anti-masking, if that's an okay, because it's not so convoluted. And I think it's mostly constrained to the COVID realm, unlike vaccines, as Sister Coyote pointed out, because I know plenty of people who just, like I said, we don't give our kids any new vaccines. That's just, I don't know. I don't give my kid anything fucking brand new like that. Let them figure it, let them test it a little bit. But that said, my kids are vaccinated on plenty of, older vaccines. Anyway, this isn't about vaccines. Back to masking, just because it gives us an example. The anti-masker does not want to sacrifice their freedom, their liberty, or as someone posted on my story, I'm not afraid of anything. I'm just like, fuck you, don't do it. Fuck you, I won't do what you tell me. But you're afraid of something if that's what your stance is. You're either afraid of them, you're afraid that you're weak, you're afraid of doing what they tell you, you're afraid of where you'll end up if you do what there's a reason you don't want to do that. And I doubt it's just the arbitrary of fuck you, because that's not a natural human thing. Fear is a very natural human thing. It's one of the first, most hardwired center of our brain, right above your spine. You got fear. It's not in your cortex. It's not in your neocortex. That shit's deep. Fear pushes all of us. So Snow Off the Bluff, we can get to that. That's like Robert Attel Wilson's reality tunnels. We'll dig into that for a second. But let me fluff out the fear thing, right? So we are acting out of fear. Some people say that there's only fear in love. We don't really have a biological basis for love. I'll put it that way. We do have a spiritual basis for one, I believe. But fear is bio-fucking-logical. Love is actually pre-biological. Love is reality, right? Unity of existence, unity of identification, compassion for self in other, when other in self. That's actually the basic reality. We have to get there. But fear's deep. Fear drives everything. And anyone who thinks, my stance on this has nothing to do with fear, absolutely don't. I'll tell you why I think that, not how I know that. Why I think that. Because at first I was like, I'm not going to let them intimidate me into getting vaccinated. And then I was like, wait a second, I'm not going to let them to intimidate me into not getting vaccinated. I'm not going to be intimidated in this situation. And I realized that, hold on. Both of these sides are being pushed with fear. So I think when we dive into these loaded paradigms, increasingly as we accept a polarized stance, right? I am this or I am that. I define myself in opposition to. First of all, we relinquish the center. Right? When you relinquish the center, anyone who's ever done any martial arts or anything that involves resilience, equanimity, sustenance, the center is very important. Chess, you play chess, you want the center of the board. I'm teaching my kid to fence. You hold the sword, control the center. As long as you control the center, you do fine. The center is where things are balanced. As you move out to the edges, you become more and more susceptible to imbalance. And the further to the edge you are, the more imbalanced you are susceptible to be. And imbalance at some point leads to failure. That's just how it goes. And it doesn't matter, boxing, control the center of the ring, control the center of the field. Again, chess, and their ergo strategy, the center. It's all controlling that central space where you are beholden to neither extreme. And that is the depolarized space, right? Cognitively, emotionally. We enter a highly polarized space, cognitively and emotionally, as we add. Really, emotion is the charge that polarizes, right? And as we add emotional charge, we polarize. Which is, look, when we're doing magical work, and the goal is to polarize things, to separate two possible results, and to distinguish the result we want from the result we don't want, that's exactly how we do it, right? We add emotional charge, we add psycho-emotional charge. It causes the possibilities to polarize, and we can accept the polarized reality we want, and that's it. That's magic. Go do it, right? You know magic now. That's all. But for our own experience of reality, and, forgive me for not indulging in we should all live in our magical reality constantly, because I think that's a little fucking dangerous. I won't even get into anything else. Dangerous. For this collective reality, this collective consciousness of which we are a part, this collective species embodiment of which we are a part, and then, of course, there's a collective planetary and universal embodiments of which we are a part. It's necessary for us to depolarize, to remove that charge, and the easiest way to do that is to seek the commonality. When we seek the commonality, that's when we come to see quote-unquote opposites as indeed points on a spectrum, right? Because cold and hot are not opposites. It's actually a spectrum of energy. from totally still to totally moving, and we're somewhere on there. Right? Light and dark aren't opposites. It's a kind of a boring same example. It's a spectrum of energy. Everything that we get into is a spectrum. And as we start to understand it as a spectrum, we can do a few cool things. One, we begin to free ourselves from the dimensional dependence on that, right? We said opposites are really only different from each other in one dimension. Green is opposite red only in wavelength of light, and in everything else they're both colors. They're pretty much the same. So when we become enmeshed in seeing things as opposites, we become beholden, you might say, or enmeshed in exclusively that dimension of difference. Again, I go to the idea of the rioter and the riot police. The fact that they live in the same city, they're all human beings, they eat the same food, often at the same places, at the same time, generally speaking. All these things go right the fuck out the window. It's just us versus them. Right? It becomes oppositional. And in that, they become stuck only in, I say we become stuck, because I've been there. We become stuck only in that dimension. Right? Those other dimensions, which are equally valid, equally true, probably further reaching and encompass a unity and a similarity that far exceeds the disunity and dissimilarity, we're unable to access those dimensions when we're stuck in the dimension of opposition. So when we, in ourselves, make the exercise of saying, I see that I'm opposed to this, I see this is opposed to me, what have you, and then say, hold on, no, I'm just stuck in a spectrum here, I need to figure out what the dimension is here. What is the dimension of commonality between me and them? Between this and that. Between peanut butter and jelly. Peanut butter and jelly seem really fucking opposite, right? Except, really, they have a huge amount in common compared to, say, like, I don't know, peanut butter and fucking asteroids, which even still have a huge amount in common. Sorry, I'm getting passionate. When compared to, say, peanut butter and liberty, which even still have some amount in common. It gets weird when you start playing with these things. Let me check out the chat. Let's see. Snow off the bluff. Neurochemically, you can distinguish consummate love from compassionate or romantic love. Well, I have a interesting. I think the physiological is. I personally believe this. I'm not saying this is scientific. It's very ascientific. I believe the physiological is secondary to a spiritual primary. We'll go into it later. Let's see. It's supposed to be basically old news in social psychology that emphasizing group difference leads to greater intergroup aggression. I think that's where a lot of activism today goes wrong. Not enough people are emphasizing group similarities plus cooperation. Right, and that's where people get into a whole conspiracy theory about activism is a plot of the Illuminati to divide us. Because you're right, it's about saying, and this was always my approach, was to go walk the riot line from end to end and look each cop in the eye and talk to them as a human being. It's an interesting thing to do when everyone's like, fuck you, fucking pigs. Like, it's very easy to hit those guys with a stick. I'll tell you that. Not as easy as I would walk the whole line and be like, you're doing what you got to do. We're doing what we got to do. Let's all do our jobs professionally. We're moving the same society forward together. Thank you for being there to be a check on us. We're here to be a check on you. It's pretty hard. It's relatively harder to hit that guy. I hope. I didn't get hit so much. A couple times. But reconciling that and finding that place of like, this is the track we're both standing on, right? I'm on this end of the track, you're on that end of the track, this is on this end of the track, that's on that end of the track. Finding the nature of the track itself and observing it as being on the same track often frees us from the dimensionality of that track. Boop. And suddenly we can see so much more of the situation, and that's how we move towards reconciliation, resolution, integration. It's natural, right? That always happens, right? Thesis, antithesis, synthesis. It's going to happen. but we can be the agents of synthesis, and that's basically what alchemy is, and which is why the book I wanted to share is called The Alchemy of Opposites. It talks about this. And every single time we see ourselves as opposed to something, this is true. And if we can apply it, we will overcome it. We'll talk about arguments in relationships. I don't know if there's anyone in here who's in relationships. I don't know if anyone has arguments in their relationships. But what I can tell you is that having just completed, knock on wood, 10 years of marriage, 100% guaranteed, the best way for us to resolve a conflict in a relationship is our little phrase that we say, which is same team. Same team means, references a one argument we had many, many years ago before we were married, where we kind of came up with that as a conclusion. But same team means, whoa, we're opposite about this one dimension of whatever the fuck we're arguing about. But our interests are aligned, and we're aligned in almost everything else, virtually everything else. Let's resolve this in that space rather than this one tiny space of opposition. For us, it works. For you, it might work too. I don't know what my camera's doing here. I thought I fixed this by upgrading, but it didn't work. But I know how to do that. I can. It just automatically like, bloop. There we go. Now we're fixed. It just automatically does that. I don't know why. So that opposition, whether it's in an individual relationship, a social relationship, intersocial, right? Two different countries relationship. Look, any masker has more in common with any anti-masker. Any vaxxer has more in common with any anti-vaxxer than they care to realize, probably. But even both of them have more in common with someone in fucking China. But they're both American too, right? There's a lot of basic reality that's around them. They're in the same media sphere, even the same social media sphere. Even if they're in different sort of sub-feeds of it, those feeds are reactive to one another, responsive to one another. When you get into other countries, they don't have this shit. They don't have this polarization on the same topic, right? Everyone has COVID right now. They don't have this polarization around COVID everywhere. I was talking to a couple people from Europe in the DMs last week, and they were like, yeah, you guys are fucking crazy around this shit. Or guns, or on and on and on and on. They don't have they have the same issues. They don't have the same polarization. And so it's crazy because we have more in common with those people that we're having the polarization with than other people elsewhere. And nonetheless, we still have a vast amount in common with every human, more than we have with like an amoeba, and we still have vastly more in common with that amoeba than we do with a rock, and we still have vastly more in common with that rock than we do with empty space, and we still have vastly more in common with empty space than we do with, I don't know, I really can't think of anything else, but whatever that is. That commonality is where we have opportunity, where we have possibility. In the polarities, once we get that psycho-emotional charge and it divides things, yeah, and things are polarized, it's like trying to move against a magnet. The only way to be able to move towards the two polarities, to get reunification, restoration, at-one-ment, the word atonement means at-one-ment, and that's why true atonement is not just feeling bad for your sins, but humbling yourself for your good things, and then you bring those things together, you get atoned. And when we get atoned, then we discharge. We have removed that. In order to become atoned, we have to remove that charge, often by letting it pass through us, or in some other way discharging it, right? There's a built-up charge. Again, we have a unity, and psycho-emotional charge comes in, it causes polarization, and in order for these two things to start to move back towards each other, we need to either discharge that, in which case they'll reconcile. This is like when you're in a fight, and then there's the crying and the embrace, right? You discharge all that psycho-emotional energy, and reunification, discharge and reunification. Or if we want to be more skillful, just because we like things slow and easy, we can release the charge. Slowly, slowly, slowly. Diminish the charge, diminish the charge, diminish the charge, and come to sort of like a nice peaceful docking. I think that's more challenging. It requires a lot more control. It requires a lot more deliberate stepping. But I think many of us have experienced that in arguments too, where we're very opposed, and then hold on. Let's start taking steps back, calming down, coming to our center, coming to ourselves. Okay. Right? That's just two ways. But in either case, what they have in common is the release of that massive charge. And it is that charge that drives the polarization. And it doesn't appear to be. It appears to be the commonality that drives the polarization. It is a psycho-emotional charge that's driving the polarization between vaxxers and anti-vaxxers. And I don't mean people making the decision to get or not get the vaccine. I mean people taking on the identity of vaxxer or anti-vaxxer, and from that place of identity, broadly attacking or opposing themselves to this other identity, right? I'm a vaxxer, I oppose anti-vaxxers. I'm an anti-vaxxer, I oppose vaxxers. That opposing of a false homogenous identity is the polarization, and it's all based on psycho-emotional charge. So by reducing psycho-emotional charge, we can step back towards, okay, see where you're at. Or we can have the sudden psycho-emotional discharge that'll cause instant reconciliation. But again, anything that's going like this is going to absorb a lot more impact than something that's slowly coming like this. And this is, in my opinion, a more gentle, kind of natural, organic way of reconciling the opposites. And we have this in everything. We must be able to recognize that wherever there is strong psycho-emotional charge, whether we realize it or not, we are subject to polarization. Okay? Reconciling those opposites is always the result of diminishing charge. And this gets into, like, Scientology. What is Scientology? What is Going Clear? What are they auditing in Scientology? That e-meter that they're using is measuring psycho-emotional charge, essentially. It's not a perfect tool. They're pretty fucking neat. I've done a lot of e-meter stuff. William S. Burroughs did a lot of e-meter stuff. If anyone has an e-meter and wants to donate one to the temple, that would be fucking awesome. The ability to measure psycho-emotional charge gives you the ability to, as we say with everything, right? When you can measure something, you can improve it, or you can change it. It's what, not necessarily improve, change it. Without measuring, you cannot undertake reasoned change. And so with the ability to measure psycho-emotional charge, we can release psycho-emotional charge. And when we release psycho-emotional charge, we reconcile opposites. When we reconcile opposites, we have a much more clear view because we become free of that unidimensional view, right? The charge of that dimension, that space of opposition compels us. And it's, at the same time, on the other hand, it's instructive to know how to do the opposite. So, very primitive biofeedback. You say snow off the bluff. I don't know if I'd call it primitive. With there's no, I don't think that there's any sophisticated biofeedback. I think you can just draw different signals. And it's not worth getting lost in the signal. Because the signal is just a referent, right? It's just a handle. It's just a pointer to something internal, which is the main focus, right? Very direct, yes, I love it. Risky, I mean, yes, not everyone should sign up for Scientology. And I think I will say the other thing, I think there are other much bigger problems in Scientology. Sister Coyote, would you be able to see this in fMRI? I don't know enough about fMRI to say. I know that shows what areas of the brain are active, so I would guess so. I don't know. I would need a neuroscientist to answer that straight up. I know that you can definitely see it in like if you like EEG, basically like the super high grade EEGs where it's like a helmet. You can actually build your own now. It's pretty fucking crazy, but it's like a helmet array on all your spots. Those definitely you can see it. So I think yes. I just can't say for sure. Like if you're about to go get an fMRI and you're like, hey, I want you to look for my emotional charge, psycho-emotional charges. Moses said that you'd be able to do that, and they say like, absolutely not, Sister Coyote. We cannot do that. I don't want you to be like, Moses, you fucking liar. You said you could. So that's why I answered so hesitantly. Yeah, that EKG, the EEG helmet definitely does it. I don't fMRI. I would assume, but someone would have to do some research to figure out the correlations based on my understanding of neuroscience, which is relatively limited. I'm definitely not an expert. I'm a layperson who has talked to a couple experts, and also expertise is fucking bullshit because everyone has a brain, and everything's just a model. So, but I'm no expert on fMRIs, that's for sure. I never run one. I've never learned how to run one. I have no training on that. So, all that said, psycho-emotional charge is a real measurable thing for sure. You can feel it in your body, man. When you just see someone and you're seething, when you have a strong reaction to someone or something, that thing is richly psycho-emotionally charged. And that's not a judgment. It's not a you did something wrong. We take on psycho-emotional charge. What you can do though is you can make it a thing you consciously address if you want to. If you want to release the charge, there's a way to engineer, and this is sort of the primitive. So let's know off the bluff. That's exactly it. The primitive Scientology way is to engineer the release that causes you to kind of collapse back together. And I think what is probably the safer way is to kind of the progressive mating, docking type thing. The instead of popping the balloon, the slowly letting the air out of the balloon, so it doesn't even make a fart noise. That I think is the safest way to do it, right? So I'm not Snow Off the Bluff. That I don't necessarily think is purely psycho-emotional. I think there's something. I think that's the soul tie, right? That's that's the soul. That you're feeling the movement of soul in that case. The psycho-emotional is more overtly compelling, right? Like when you feel that feeling that you're talking about, and for those who are maybe reading, the response is, feeling people go. He said, my friend's dad, a vet, mentioned feeling people leave this world. I asked him if it was the same dank, cool, heavy feeling in my gut that killing a bird gave me. He said, that's it. Yeah. That is a change in the energetic quality, not a permanent change, I don't think, but a change in the energetic quality of the soul. And technically the psycho-emotional does reside in the soul, but I think the psycho-emotional charge is a change in not the quality so much as the quantity. Meaning, I think that it's a matter of like amplitude, rather than pitch. I think it's that's just what I think. Well, I think we can all feel all these things because we're all parts of the same thing. My foot doesn't really feel it when I hit my head, but it's aware of it. I think it's like that. So that process of releasing the psycho-emotional charge is probably what we'll look at more this week. We still have more time to talk now. But that's the name of the game in terms of like personal path. Finding the highly charged things is actually usually pretty easy because we react strongly to them. Then we know that's a charged thing. And then when we've reacted strongly to something and we know that's a charged thing, the next trick is to see that thing and see us and find that line connecting them. What's that dimension of commonality between them? Then we can start resolving the charge around that dimension. All right, we can start by looking for the charge around that dimension and then resolving the charge around that dimension. And when we do that, we end up in a place much more peaceful, much less polarized, much less subject to imbalance and failure, and ultimately much more real. Right? The thing about that charge is, and I think why we as humans kind of love it, like we love that charge. Every online argument that I've ever gotten into, you've ever gotten into, anyone's ever had, is based upon how much we love that fucking charge. That psycho-emotional charge is a drug to us because it reinforces ego. You might say that ego at any given time is the net balance of the psycho-emotional charges. And absent all psycho-emotional charge, ego will be gone. And I think this is like that experience of enlightenment we talk about, right? Enlightenment is transpersonal, it's the ego death, all that. It's the release of all psycho-emotional charge. Because psycho-emotional charge, again, is the net field of psycho-emotional charges that hold and support the ego. So we love that shit because it fucking secures the ego in that field. But the ego is in a way, just simply a figment of that field. A thing to think about. And look, fuck, if you love being egotic, I'm not here to tell you it's wrong. I find it's not as it's more stressful for me. I don't like being stressed. Some people like being stressed. I don't like being stressed. I don't like being stressed. I don't like being worried. I don't like I like homeostasis. That's what I believe that I evolved to be pretty good at. I like reproduction because that's another thing that kind of wired for. Stress and all those other things I'm wired to deal with, but I'm not really wired to exist in. So, people can choose your own adventure, as always. That said, I personally find that the ego experience is isolating. I find that the ego experience is inherently unfulfilling. I find that the ego experience is a distraction from the reality before my face. And I find that the ego experience is exhausting from carrying all that psycho-emotional charge. And I'm not saying that, one should go around and be like, I don't give a shit about anything. Apathy is not what I'm talking about. But I'm not strongly attached to any particular polarity on things. To me, this approach is equanimity. This is, sagacity, as far as I can tell. The way of a sage seems to be there. I'm far off still. But I think we can best get to a destination when we know where we want to head. So that's what I got, I think, on this topic for today. Tomorrow we can maybe start looking at some techniques and methods for releasing discharge, if that sounds good for people, or for discharging, for releasing psycho-emotional charge, if that's something that people are interested in. Holler at me, let me know out there, y'all peoples. Party peoples. I think I lent that book to someone. This is why I need to get the library software going, because I kind of vaguely now remember lending it to someone, and I can't vaguely remember who. I'll have to buy another copy. That's unfortunate. That copy was signed. But I'll find it. Oh, well. Well, if you're watching this and you have my signed Alchemy of Opposites book, just let me know. I'm looking for it. There's a chance that someone who will be watching... Yeah, it's not on the shelf. There's a chance that whoever has it will be someone who's watching this. So, yeah, I think we'll look at some techniques for that. And there are internal and external ones. Many things that we already do. Divination, automatic writing, mediumship, sessions lead ultimately to are based on and lead to the release of psycho-emotional discharge. There's some theories that point that all spiritual experience is fundamentally based on the release and interaction with psycho-emotional energy. I'm not an expert on this stuff, but I'll share what I know. I'll share what works for me, as usual. All right, let's see what we got here. Oh, tons of people wandered in while I wasn't paying attention. So Academy Impossible, Amiga, Andy WMT, another TV viewer, Corazon Crystal, haven't seen you in a while. Welcome back. Ice Wizards, likewise, haven't seen you in a while. Welcome back. NyQuil, I knew you were here. Sister Coyote, we've been talking. Snow Off the Bluff, we've been talking. Sticky Nine Blade, Solomon, I didn't know you were here, buddy. Welcome back, I guess. I'll see you downstairs in a minute. So, I guess one thing we can look for as we move into our meditation practice, to kind of apply and operationalize some of this stuff is that meditation we were doing last week. For those who have been along with us for the weekly journey, we were feeling that energy field around our body. We can use that as a domain for that release of psycho-emotional energy. That is, when we sort of open a channel between one of the things about the psycho-emotional energy and that makes it so powerfully polarizing is that we hold it. We don't allow it to flow. We don't allow it to escape. We hold it and allow it to build. So once we kind of even just make a little channel, we don't have to open the whole thing, but if we're able to make a little channel between that held psycho-emotional energy, it's held somewhere in the body, not any specific place it's not in any specific place for everyone, nor is every psycho-emotional ball, we'll say, held in the same place for everyone. You hold different ones in different places of your body. But if we can identify the place in the body where we are holding it, or the place in the body associated with where we're holding it, it gets a little esoteric. And we can focus on releasing or relaxing that place in the body and focus on using that outer sort of energy layer that we've been practicing getting in touch with to draw or to align the released energy to it. You can experience a pretty fucking crazy, it's like an orgasm, psycho-emotional discharge. It's a sudden, very extreme whoop, like there's a change in order of magnitude of that psycho-emotional energy that had been held and isolated. It's doable. It happens. You get like a weird shiver, and you can go through and find those things. The finding is hard. You can't necessarily completely. You can trust your intuition, but your intuition will always guide you around it. So sometimes you have to. I've talked before about inferring by absence. Like if you sort of do a scan of your body and you're like, well, I just don't feel this area for whatever reason. It's probably in there. It's probably in that area. And so then it becomes like, how do I tune in with that area I don't feel? And then once I've become tuned into it, then let me focus on release, let go, open up. Very often I'll picture opening my hand, opening the word open, the word let go, the word release. All those things kind of help. And then you feel it. And then once, if your sort of outer energy level is enough, it will pull it like an air filter. You know, like the ionizer on an air filter just pulls allergens and shit. It'll just pull it because of the charge. So I realize this is potentially not explicit enough to... One of the things that I was always frustrated with receiving meditation instruction was that they used all these words that didn't have any hard specific meanings. And I remember sitting in meditation when I learned breath counting, actually, in like 6th grade. I remember sitting there going like, what does he mean by energy? What does he mean by... And like that certainly didn't help me meditate, yeah? So if you guys have any questions like that, I want you to ask them. There's no stupid question. The only stupid thing is to sit there and pretend you're doing something because you were too shy to ask a question. So yeah, let me know if there are any questions on anything I've been describing, because we're about to try it for a solid 10 minutes here. So this is your chance as I take my last coffee and my last puff here. No, it seems like you guys are all good and ready to go. Cool. Well, let me get the timer going. Sorry, my phone's off. It's going to take a second. So basically, if we're just talking technically what we're doing here, if we're talking about meditation techniques, we've kind of done all the parts of this, right? We've done body scans many times. So it's a body scan with a very clear mind. Do a body scan, find the parts that are, again, observe by absence, right? Observe the parts that are not showing up on the scan. and open them up so you can scan them is all you're trying to do, basically. That's what you would be doing if it was a normal body scan. And body scan is not a technical term. It's just the term I'm using for this type of meditation that we've done before, where we are paying attention to the different parts of our body and figuring out what we have a good ability to interact, good ability to feel and move our attention into, and what seems to be resisting that and what seems to we can't do that, because we can't do it for everything. That's number one. And then number two that we're doing in this process is that, and I will also say probably the order should be opposite. What I'm about to describe is what we're going to do first, which is really become attuned to the energetic layer just outside the skin. And again, the ways we can do that are by rubbing hands. We can do the qigong, the clicking of nails for a few minutes to just really build up the bioelectricity, and then feel that energy layer and try to, use your practice, bring your conscious attention to that layer, stimulate it, right? Bring that layer to a high level of energy, basically. And while it's in a high level of energy, perform a body scan, right? And you're going to see, if you hit it right, it's like this orgasmic wave. Sometimes it comes from down there, whatever. But it's a wave felt in your body. I'm not speaking metaphorically. You will feel, just like when you have an orgasm, how you feel a wave of energy discharging through your body. You will feel something like that. You may twitch a little. You may jerk. It is completely possible. And it should be possible for anyone who's not like a Buddha. If you're a Buddha, you have no psycho-emotional energy to discharge. And I am very grateful that you've chosen to sit and watch and practice with us, and I hope that your being in communion with us brings us all closer to equanimity and balance. For everyone else, though, you can do this. Maybe not in one session, because it's working almost that biofeedback thing on two very different things. One being the I guess, as we just said, there's no opposites, so they're no very different. It's finding energy in and around your body and learning how to manipulate it is the common ground here. But it's finding the stuck energy and opening it, and finding the already moving energy and making it move faster, basically. So with that said, hopefully my phone is booted up now. Yep. Let me get the clock. Clocky docky. And the timer's set for 10 minutes. There are no questions. Here we go. I'm going to mute my mic so I can turn on my air conditioner. I am not going to do the theta waves for this one. Really just because I find that the theta waves are pretty compelling as far as your frequency, and your ability to independently stimulate your frequency and attune to things is going to be a little less. You can scan your chakras first, but you won't necessarily be holding this stuff in your, in that chain of harmonic resonance. It could be in the palm of your hand. One way to do this that's pretty effective is to consciously, from head to toe, relax every single part of your body and find the places that you can't figure out how to relax. Because theoretically, every muscle can be relaxed. If there's a muscle that you can't figure out how to relax, it's holding something. Get in there and release that muscle, and release the chain of muscles that it refer. As soon as you release that muscle, you're going to feel it refer to a chain of other muscles. And if you can release that whole chain, you'll have that discharge that I am describing. So everyone pretty much know what they're doing. Everyone ready to give it a go? Let's do it. Timer is set for 10. I'm going to mute the mic, turn the timer on, and we'll get meditating right now. So, timer's going. Enjoy. You can work with your breath on this exercise. So when you inhale, just pause. And when you exhale, release. And in between breaths, find the next space. Inhale and pause. Let the breath turn. Find the center of the space you're in as it's turning. On the exhale, release. Then let your attention drift to the next space. And on the inhale, pause. Locate the center. Release. And drift to the next space. If you find that you've reached an area that resists releasing, you're getting close. Don't try to force it. Just trust it. Focus on release on every exhale. If you try to force, you will. Focus the other way. Focus on release on every exhale. On the inhale, constellate your consciousness, your focus in that place of yourself. And on the exhale, release. And just like waves lapping a shore, just let your breath and your attention erode it and open it up. And when it opens up, you will feel heat or cold moving through your body in waves, energetically moving through your body in waves. Just release, ride that and let it release. Be mindful of that layer of energy above your skin and rev it up again every so often. Dang, I just hit some good stuff. We're at 10 minutes, guys. So we're going to continue moving on. You can drop back into that. And really, that's a meditation that takes about 90 minutes to do. Like, I didn't even complete my head, for reference. So if you're like, I didn't complete my scan in that time, I wasn't able to do that. Totally. I've taken as long as 2.5 hours on that. It's an okay one to do while you're going to sleep, but there's a good chance you'll fall asleep before you complete. But if you can find time, like in the middle of the day when you're awake and that you're not disturbed, to do that for a couple hours, it's profound what you find in your body. You'll find things also like, I don't know, for example, as you release things, you start to feel them again, things that maybe you have stopped physically feeling. And you'll find a lot of like mucus and fluids and bile and all kinds of stuff that had gotten blocked off in those various subtle passages because you weren't able to feel them. Starts flowing and doing weird stuff. That's totally normal. But you will start feeling things. And as you feel things, like I have a tickle in my lung right now. As I feel it, my body wants to tense up around it. As it tenses up, it seems to, I stop feeling it. So I have to bring my mind in there now and say, no, relax. I know it's irritating, but relax and feel that. And you can do crazy stuff. If you can pull that off, you can cough things out, like things in your lungs. You can actually, your body naturally will carry it up. But then the other part of you will say, uncomfortable, hold on, don't like uncomfort. But the lungs on their own want to bring it up, but your mind will say uncomfortable, hold on. But if you can overrule your mind and say like, no, let lungs do their thing, crazy what your body will naturally, bring out. Like it cause you can feel it. I can actually feel that specific thing I was talking about here now. And I expect that shortly after we finish, within the next half hour, unless I get distracted. But if I stay focused and I focus on just continuing relax, it's about here now. I focus on relax, and I can feel things shifting in here. It's going to end up being in my mouth, and I'll be able to spit it out. I can already tell that. All right, well, with that said, where are we at? Academy Impossible, Andy WMT, Core Zone, Crystal, Ice Wizards, NyQuil, Snow Off the Bluff, Sticky Nine Blade, What Do Mushrooms Look Like? You guys hung this far. And maybe one of the Chen brothers over there on Facebook. Again, it doesn't show me, but regardless, welcome and thank you. So let's get to this part. Oh, this time I'm taking a big stretch. Big stretch. I'm kind of reaching for the heavens here. Just real quick. Oh, I just needed that stretch. That had nothing to do with prayers. Sometimes you just need to stretch the shoulders. And so we find that as we allow ourselves to reside in our bodies and allow ourselves to be aware and open, although there is pain and discomfort in all that simply allowing ourselves is the shortest route to allowing that pain and discomfort to pass through and out of us. So may we allow ourselves completely in our bodies, from the left side to the right side and from the right side to the left side, from the front to the back and from the back to the front, from the top to the bottom and from the bottom to the top. May we allow ourselves to release and trust these vehicles that carry us. May we open the passageways that we close in fear. May the fear of unknowingness and uncertainty be extinguished as we come to recognize with knowing and certainty that we are one another and the world around us. In doing so, let us open our passages within ourselves to allow that which ought to flow in, and that which ought to flow out, to flow out. Let the closing of our passages be not for the purpose of restricting, but for propelling, as by opening and closing, those pulsations push every subtle essence of our body, every subtle fluid of our body, our living breath and our life itself through our body, out through the surface of our body and into the universe around us. May we be granted an awareness of these miracles that are constantly occurring within us, around us, and in concert with everything else that we observe. May we be driven to reconcile polarities as we release the psycho-emotional charges that keep us from recognizing unity. May we therefore be brought greater towards peace, towards oneness, towards a recognition of a universal vitality of which we partake. May we take it into ourselves and exhale it out of ourselves, that every other part may take it in. And in that unity, may we find calm purpose, certainty, direction, peace. May we find that the roads are open to us, for the roads are our very feet. May we move forward with confidence. May those things, persons, and opportunities that benefit us be attracted to us in order to hasten the process of reunification, the restoration of the one absolute truth. Amen. By the way, that thing is in here now. It's going to come out my nose, not my mouth, but I'm going to go blow that thing out in a couple seconds. Gang, it's been a pleasure. I'm really enjoying these not watching video ones, and maybe we'll do video nights or something like that. But let me know. Let me know in the chat. Let me know in the Discord if you prefer this, if you dig this. Don't forget to hit that follow button. We did just get up to 200. That's awesome. If you don't like seeing advertisements, and I know I don't like you seeing advertisements, especially if you are an Amazon Prime member, please don't forget to hit that subscribe button down there in the bottom right beyond the corner of the screen. Go ahead and hit that subscribe button. Then you won't have to see any advertisements. And don't forget, tell a friend, and tell a friend to tell a friend. So much of what we're doing here is subject to what's called Moore's Law, that the more nodes in a network, the more powerful the network is. The more people we have on this wavelength, the further each of us individually and the further all of us collectively will be able to get into this wavelength. So please tell a friend, bring a friend next time. It's easy, just share a link, and invite him to the Discord too. Also, if you're not in the Discord, for example, Mr. Chen, I don't know if you're in the Discord, because I don't know if when you watch on Facebook that link is available to you. I'm going to try to drop the Discord in the multi-stream. Oh, I can't post a multi-stream chat. Dang. Well, if you are not on the Discord, make sure you're checking this out on Twitch. If you go to twitch.tv/HoodooMoses, or to this address above my head here, the streamlabs.com/HoodooMoses. Oops. Jeez, I'm not good at this mirror thing. You'll be able to link right to the Discord there. And that group, that forum, is where this goes 24 hours a day. Sometimes, you can't necessarily engage at exactly the time we're streaming. So as the Discord has all this stuff and everything else, our whole library and all that good jazz. With that said, as every day, each and every one of you, I thank you for joining me. I bless you in your day as you move forward till we meet again. And I love you now and always for taking your journey in your heart. And I'm grateful that our paths have crossed at this point. I'll see you tomorrow.